Chapter 1. Why D-Day? The Second World War was a conflict unlike any other that had come before. During the First World War, a network of alliances had turned the war in the Balkans into one that engulfed all of Europe, but fighting in the rest of the world was limited. World War II, on the other hand, brought together a long-standing war between Japan and China, German attempts to create a European empire, and battles for control of colonies across Africa and Asia. When Japanese ambitions brought America into the fighting in 1941, it became a single maelstrom of destruction that spanned the globe, involving every leading military power and dozens of other nations. In Europe, the Axis powers of Germany and Italy were the aggressors at every turn. The Germans occupied vast swaths of Eastern Europe, half of Scandinavia, and Western Europe all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. The fall of France briefly left Britain as the only sovereign and unconquered nation in Europe still opposing the tide of blood. The British, aided by their colonies, allies in the Commonwealth, and thousands of soldiers who had fled the conquered countries, fought on in the skies above Europe and in colonial possessions around the world, especially North Africa, where fighting swayed back and forth from early in the war. It was the arrival of the Americans that turned the tide of that campaign. Though it was a Japanese attack that brought them into the war, from the start they made Europe their main priority. They believed it would be easier to defeat Germany first and then its ally Japan. The Americans joined the British in North Africa late in 1942, bringing their substantial economic resources and a vast pool of manpower to bear. Though the campaign had its setbacks, it signaled the near inevitable defeat of the Axis powers in the face of superior resources. The Allies drove the Axis forces back into a smaller and smaller pocket in northeast Tunisia until the last Germans and Italians were forced to surrender. North Africa was important for the control of supply routes, but it was also a springboard for an invasion of Europe. Behind the scenes, the British and Americans continued to argue about how to knock out Germany, the leader of their European opponents and the most powerful enemy in that theater of the war. The Americans favored developing a grand plan to invade France, liberating another potential powerful ally, and push from there directly into Germany. The British, who had fewer resources and struggled from the start with the strength of the German military, favored a more cautious approach, fighting step by step, taking opportunities as they come. If they could win the war by bombing Germany or invading through some other route, they could avoid the costs and risks of a sea-borne landing in France. The result was a compromise. Some resources were put into invading Italy from Africa in 1943, while a larger portion were held in reserve to invade France in the following year. The Italian campaign was a success, as that country's government almost immediately flipped sides, forcing the Germans and those Italians who backed them to fight against local resistance as well as foreign invaders. But it was a slow-burning campaign in which Kesselring, the German commander, built a series of defensive lines that slowed down and eventually halted the Allied advance. Meanwhile, the war was turning against the Germans in Eastern Europe. Having betrayed and invaded their former allies in the Soviet Union, the Germans became bogged down in a grueling war against a nation of immense resources and unquenchable determination. The Eastern Front became a huge drain on the German war machine, making a successful invasion in the West more plausible.